Pittsburgh.com, here to do another kind of talk to the tape session. Back after a little time off following the bye week, but after the Steelers, again, unfortunately, 21-14 loss this past Sunday to the Baltimore Ravens, sending the Steelers to 4-4 into that muddy AFC North. Time to look back on this game as we've covered throughout the week and we'll cover throughout the rest of the week and get you ready for Dallas this Sunday at 4:25. Now, we've talked about a lot of the bad in the podcast and the terrible podcast and through some of our articles we've done. I want to focus on one of the good here. And one of the positive things from this game was the defense in general, which was pretty good. Certainly made their mistakes, including the big one, the 95-yard touchdown to Mike Wallace. But overall, the defense played a lot better, expected, especially against a pretty below average to really probably a bottom five offense in the Baltimore Ravens. And the biggest thing the Steelers defense did and set out to do in their mission, and they accomplished it, was their run defense. Ravens had nothing on the ground. I forget their final totals, but Terrence West was their leading rusher at about 30 yards. They didn't have any really long runs at all. I think the longest run might have been 8 yards, which I think came on the first play of the game, which we're actually going to talk about today. But that's not just because Kim Hayward returned. It's easy to say, well, they got healthier, and that's definitely part of it. You get Kim Hayward back, you're one of your stars, and Ryan Shazier plays a full complement of snaps. You're going to be better just naturally, but there's a lot more to it. Pittsburgh, and specifically Keith Butler, did a couple different things, both, I think, pregame in the game plan and in-game adjustments to really kind of tighten the nuts and bolts on this Steelers run defense and shut the Ravens down. And so we're going to look at some of those things today. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to look at that first Ravens run, and it's really one of their best runs of the day. It's an 8-yard gain in the first play of the game. And how the Ravens were successful and created this 8-yard gain. So what they do is, right here, you see Steve Smith come in motion right before the snap, and they're going to fake the threat of an end around to him. And we're going to get a better look at this on the end zone angle. But that's the key here, is they're going to fake this end around to Steve Smith. And what this does is it holds the backside linebacker, Jarvis Jones, so he can't crash down on the zone flow by the offensive line. He has to respect the threat of an end around, because if he crashes and they are running an end around, now there's no one to stop Steve Smith. Now you have a dangerous receiver in space. So let's take a look at it here. And this allows Jones to be unblocked by the Ravens while still being held. And that's the best way to stop a defender, is to stop him without having to actually block him and focus a body on him. So let's run this through. There's the end around threat. And it's going to hold Jones enough because he doesn't know what's happening. It could be a handoff, which is what it was. It could be the end around to Smith. And if he crashes down once, they could run it again. And then they're going to run the end around to Steve Smith. And so what it does on the zone play, creates a nice cutback lane, nice down block here from Ronnie Stanley. Jarvis has great hustle, chases the football, kudos to him. But it's an 8-yard gain. It's a great play for Baltimore. So let's run this thing through full speed. Jarvis being held by the end around threat, 8-yard gain. Big positive play on first down for Baltimore. One more time, we'll look at it. Again, watch Jarvis Jones in the end around threat by Steve Smith. It's a nice read by Terrence West. And that, you have your bang, bounce, and bend read. And that's what West did there. Had a really nice read there to read the hat and get upfield. So, why do I show the negative play? Well, we're starting with the in-game adjustments that Keith Butler made. And, that's the first play of the game. In the first half, let's look at one of the early runs here in the second half. Yeah, scroll over to it here. So what adjustment does Keith Butler make? Actually, make sure I have the right play. There it is. It's the very first play of the second half. And they'd run this adjustment throughout the game too. This is just one example of it. I just pulled up the first one that I saw, kind of prepping for this. Now you're going to see Steve Smith, same thing. He's going to come in motion pre-snap. He doesn't really start in motion because he's in a reduced split. But instead of no one taking him, now they're going to have the corner run with him across the formation. And it's going to allow Jarvis Jones to be able to play inside. So again, the end zone angle is going to show a much better look at it than the aerial. There's Steve Smith right there. Going to fake that end around again. Zone concept again. See that flow coming down. Also get a split zone look with the tight end. Dennis Pitta. But now you have Artie Burns following before, and we'll go back and so you can compare. Burns wasn't following; they were just passing it off, which is typical for Pittsburgh. They're a zone coverage team majority of the time. They're not going to follow too often. I'm not going to put a cornerback like Artie Burns in the slot if Steve Smith lines up there. But now they're going to follow with Artie Burns, and Sean Davis also goes with Dennis Pitta. Now Jones has doesn't have to worry about the threat of the underground. He knows that there's motion coming across. So if they were to give it to Steve Smith, Jones can crash down, play the running back, and now Burns is responsible for the open field tackle on Steve Smith. No guarantee about it, but it's not going to be a guy in the open field. You have a defender responsible for the end around that's not Jarvis Jones. Now Jones is free to play the crash. Now again, the split zone action, which is a nice adjustment by the Ravens. They didn't have that before. It's that chess game of football, but allows Jones to crash down and forces Pitta to pick him up. Ends up being a holding call on this play, I think by Ronnie Stanley, that negates this ended up being an 8-yard gain as well. So maybe not the ideal example here to show, but it's the concept behind it, and this happened a couple times throughout the game, and they were able to get some stops off of it. So you talk about adjustments, and people love to use predictable and not adjusting or adjusting and out coaching things like that. Keith Butler has done a really nice job this year of responding to some of those game adjustments. And when things go wrong, they figure it out. They know what happened. They correct it. Primarily with the run defense. They've done that with a lot of the different kind of wrinkles they've thrown in. One time this year, they had a play where they had 2 3-techs, Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt, both as a 3 tackle. It allowed the center to have a free release, and it created a big gain. So the next time they did that with the 2 3-techs, they put Lawrence Timmons right over center, so the center couldn't have that free release. It worked a whole lot better. So there's some really encouraging things in Keith Butler. Not that he needs my validation for it, but you definitely see some of the in-game adjustments, and this is a prime example. So let me run through this play one more time, then we'll go back to the first play so you can compare. Again, Burns falling on the end around, and able to free up Jarvis Jones and kind of make him more singular focused on what to do. And again, the first play of the game, this run, no one's going to follow. See, cornerback staying, and then Jones has to respect that end around threat, and it turns into an 8-yard gain that stands this time, and it puts Jarvis in a lose-lose where he's being held by the threat of the end around, and he can't come down freely and have that backside crash on the running back. So that's one thing that they did. Next up, I want to go to something we saw last year, and I saw in training camp, so I knew it was still there, it still existed, but I really had barely seen it this season, and we see it this time. And I don't have a great title for it. If someone knows what the best thing to call this, I mean, I know verbiage changes, it doesn't really matter. But this is kind of that faux 4-3, where it is almost a 4-3 look. There's a much bigger shift going on here, and they did this early last year, and I don't know for sure, but I think they typically run it against teams that are more conservative and more traditional and go with more 2 tight end sets. This is in 12 personnel. Baltimore, the game they did it the most last year was San Francisco, where I think they did it 17 times, and the 49ers are a pretty tight end heavy kind of team, fullback and tight end heavy. They had Bruce Miller last year. They had a bunch of tight ends, and the Ravens are fairly similar. You have the tight ends. They have a bunch of tight ends, and they have Juszczyk as their fullback. So I think this is kind of the tendency of when this team likes to bust this out. But what it is, if you're not familiar with it or you haven't heard about it in a while, is again, I don't have a great name for it, but what you're doing is you shift Daniel McCullers to the strong side of the formation. It's almost like an overfront. He becomes the 3 technique. You have Stephon Tuitt, basically, he could be the 5, or he's basically lining head up, a little inside shade maybe, as the 4 technique. And Cam Hayward, who's typically going to play probably around the 4 technique here, becomes your actual nose tackle, where he's lining up as the 1 tech in between center and guard. It pushes Anthony Chickala, who'd usually be on the line of scrimmage off ball, and then Jarvis Jones does keep his kind of usual outside linebacker spot. So let's run this through real quick. This is a great play by Ryan Shazier. Not a whole lot I'm going to talk about in terms of the individual play here. I just want to look at the different formation and different look. There's actually some problems here. Daniel McCullers gets dusted by Marshall Leanda, and no, he did not trip. He just went down like a like a house of cards. And then Shazier has a nice read and explosion to force the fumble. But that's just kind of not a different look and not a new look, but one they brought back. And I think they ran it a lot this game. And, I think that I wanted to point that out. So let's look at it one more time. Just again, Tuitt becoming kind of the edge guy here. No true outside linebacker. Chickalo off ball. McCullers moves to the 3 tech, Hayward is the 1, and so you basically get that 4-3 look where you have 4 down front and 3 linebackers. Now, I don't think this is a precursor to Tomlin trying to change this into a 4-3. Again, this is kind of a very specialty situation based on the right team. Hadn't really seen it much at all this year. You saw it a little bit. I did see it a good bit in training camp, so I knew it was still around the playbook. I think they scrapped it last year because it was new and with all the confusion on the defense so early in the season because they hadn't played together in preseason because of all the injuries. They just didn't want to infuse all these new concepts, and so they really kind of scrapped it. Plus, again, it's a specialty thing with not many teams being tight end heavy and fullback heavy. You're not going to have a whole lot of opportunities to use it. But they did bring this back. I don't have the exact number how many times they did it. I'm looking at my notebook right now. I write everything down before I type it up. But I see it a lot, and we do have that designated in our charting, so we can say exactly how many times they use it. So we'll have that number later in the week. Last one I want to check out today is something that might be even more unusual. And I think they did it maybe a little bit less than what I thought the second time through my notes. Sometimes watching the TV tape, it's a little tough to tell. But the thing that they did differently here, I don't have the exact number of times they did this. Maybe 3. I'd have to go back and really kind of fine tooth comb it. But they stayed in base. They're when I say base in this situation, I mean they're 3-4 defense against 11 personnel, which they never do. It's extremely rare. Usually they're going to respond to whatever personnel grouping you put out there. So if you put 3 wide receivers out there, Steelers are going to go nickel. They're going to go with a 2-4-5 nickel. Not in this case. And this is super rare, and this is kind of interesting. So I'm going to show the end zone look. Actually, I'm going to show the aerial view. Because the Ravens are in 3 receiver set. There's one receiver up here, another receiver here, and another one there. I think this is like Kamar Aiken or Perriman, and you got, I think, maybe Steve Smith down here, Chris Moore down here. Doesn't matter, but they are definitely receivers. It's not a tight end flexed out. There's no tackle eligible in. It's a true 11 personnel, and the Steelers are staying in their 3-4. So they have their 3 linemen here. Again, they're in that kind of faux 4-3 front with that shift. Now Hargrave's the 3 tech, Matthews is the 1 tech, Chicolo off ball, but they're staying in 3-4, which is, I mean, they did it, I think, twice this year against the Jets, though I think there were some maybe late getting off the field situations, but they did it enough in this game that this was definitely intentional. And so for them to stay in this 3-4 against 11 again is incredibly rare. I mean, you're talking about maybe 2 plays the last 3 seasons we've charted that kind of stuff. Where they haven't responded, in turn with what the offense brings out there. So, but I think the point of that was we need to shut down the Ravens' run defense. We need to make them one-dimensional. We are going to sacrifice a little bit of what we usually do to ensure that we shut their run game down because we do not want these guys running on us. We want to force Baltimore to pass. We have to correct our run defense issues. And that was kind of the number one goal. That was, you're going to sacrifice anything else to be able to do that. And what they end up doing is they just, in this situation they didn't do it, but in some other situations they just will roll the safety down to cover the slot guy. This time, it's a zone coverage, and you're going to get a 2 deep shell here. But in other instances, they did it in this game. They rolled a safety down, Sean Davis again. Who the nice thing about Sean Davis is because you've taught him to play nickel. Even though they're kind of using him at safety now, he can still play nickel in some of those times where he has to roll down because he has that background and he's pretty familiar with that. He does limit you coverage wise, playing a single high safety. Basically, end up running just cover 1 man free. But it is an option, and if you really have the heart and the desire to say we got to shut this run game down, this is what they're doing. And one that says kind of how poor the run defense has been by saying we have to do something pretty radical by the Steelers standards, but it also says that we're going to adjust and be flexible and do some things that we don't normally do and might be a little uncomfortable with, but it's an effort to do the thing we have to do above all else, which is stop the run and get after the quarterback. And in this case, we're talking about stopping the run. And they did a great job. They shut down the Ravens' run game, even though the Ravens were getting healthier with Yonda back and Stanley back, very reminiscent of the Dolphins game. But the result, Dolphins to Ravens, very, very different. Although the ultimate result, loss, is still the same. But that's not the focus here. The focus is on their run defense, which was so much better for a lot of reasons. Again, they got healthier, but schematically they did some really nice things, some new things, some things that were borrowed and brought back. and some nice in-game adjustments by Keith Butler. So tip my hat to their run defense. They really played a lot better. And they're going to have to this week against Dallas because Dallas has a much, much better rushing attack, one of the best in the league with a fantastic front five and a rookie running back that's running over everybody in Ezekiel Elliott. So much tougher task, but this gives me some hope and some promise and some much needed optimism. And again, the Steelers really need to win. So thank you guys for watching. Be sure to stick with Steelers Depot throughout the week as we get you ready for Dallas and kind of do some tying a bow on this Ravens game. And be sure to follow myself and Dave Ryan and Matthew Marksy and our whole casting crew at Steelers Depot. Remember, we have our mailbag today, Thursday, at 2:30 p.m., which will run for about an hour. And we have our live stream, live chat Friday. That'll be at 3. Should still be at 3. I'll let you know if that changes. And we also do some Facebook Q&As now. We just had one today. If you're watching right now and if you find the post on Facebook, we'll try to answer it. But be sure to like our Facebook page, Steelers Depot, of course, and you can be the one that can get in on some Q&As on Facebook as well. So thank you guys for watching, and we will talk to you soon.